please to take your seats. Well, let me extend a very warm welcome to all of you and to thank you for joining us here this evening for the 2025 Southeast Asia Oration. My name is Peter Varghese. I'm the chair of AsiaLink, and I'm delighted to introduce this special event. Before we begin tonight's proceedings, the University of Melbourne would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation, and we pay respects to elders past and present. Let me, on a housekeeping matter, also advise everyone that this evening's proceedings will be recorded, and so if you have a question in the Q&A session of the event, your voice will be forever recorded. Tonight's oration will be presented by Maria Ressa, a Nobel laureate, distinguished journalist, and the founder and CEO of Rappler. In 2021, Maria was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her efforts to address corruption and safeguard freedom of expression in her native Philippines. This event is proudly co-hosted by AsiaLink and the Asia Institute, both located at the University of Melbourne and sponsored by the ASEAN Australia Centre, whose head will shortly introduce our speaker. AsiaLink is Australia's national centre for engagement with Asia. It develops capabilities, connections and insights across arts and culture, business, education and diplomacy. And the Asia Institute is the home of Asian languages and societies at the University of Melbourne. Its academics are at the forefront of research into the intellectual, legal, political, economic, cultural and religious traditions and transformations of Asia and the Islamic world. This oration is designed to hear the voices of senior leaders across Southeast Asia. It recognises that Australia's engagement with the region must involve both the mind and the heart, that it flows from an understanding of mutual interest as well as mutual understanding. The Australia-Southeast Asian connection is, of course, a story at many levels, a narrative of government-to-government relations, of connections forged in commerce, of diaspora groups building distinctive bridges between Australia and their countries of origin, and of individuals in civil society and professional organisations who understand that we have much to learn from each other. There is nothing static about the story of Australia and Southeast Asia. It has changed over time as both Australia and the region have changed. It has gone through periods of neglect, anxiety, imagined bounty, indifference, exhortation, and controversy. The one constant in this relationship is a recognition that Southeast Asia is Australia's strategic hinterland. Its internal stability and its external positioning are and will remain critical elements in Australia's strategic peace of mind. Southeast Asia is at the geographic centre of a shifting strategic environment. It has no interest in a new Cold War. It wants a region which is not forced to choose. It sees balance, not hegemony, as the best outcome. As a US ally, Australia, of course, has its own strategic perceptions. But while our perspectives may differ, it is also the case that Australia and Southeast Asia occupy a common strategic space and that our strategic futures are inextricably intertwined. The next decade will test many elements of the policies of both Australia and the countries of Southeast Asia? Can the US and China manage competition short of conflict? Is it inevitable that a strategic competitor morphs into an enemy? How far will decoupling go, and at what economic cost to all of us? And how do we find the vocabulary to re-prosecute the case for an open economy and a liberalising trading system at a time when the siren calls of self-reliance and protectionism grow ever louder? ASEAN's rise and cohesion has been a great stabiliser of the region. But ASEAN also reflects the great diversity of Southeast Asia, where there is no single culture or view of things. It is a place of many languages, religions, and civilizations. So in many ways, Australia's ability to engage with Southeast Asia is a test of something bigger: our ability as a nation to deal with difference and diversity, to forge partnerships which transcend language or values, to move beyond our comfort zone. That is the backdrop to tonight's oration. AsiaLink and the Asia Institute are grateful to the ASEAN Australia Centre for sponsoring tonight's events. And I would now like to invite the head of the ASEAN Australia Centre, Fiona Hogarth, to introduce our 2025 Southeast Asia Orator. Thank you.
Thank you for the warm welcome, Peter. And I'd like to join you in acknowledging the traditional owners of the country on which we meet, the Wiradjuri people of the Kulin Nations, and their elders past and present, and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here this evening. It's an absolute pleasure to be here representing the ASEAN Australia Centre at the 2025 Southeast Asia Oration. We are honoured to be partnering with AsiaLink, the Asia Institute at the University of Melbourne to deliver tonight's event, and I thank all of those who worked so hard to make it happen. If I could share a tiny detail, it was that we didn't know that Maria was going to be able to come and when we did, everyone worked together to make it happen, because we just couldn't miss this opportunity. And it's so wonderful that all of you have made time in your busy schedules and lives to be with us tonight. In March last year, 10 leaders of Southeast Asian nations joined Prime Minister Anthony Albanese at a summit on the banks of the Yarra River. And at that summit, as part of the Melbourne Declaration, the leaders agreed to establish the ASEAN Australia Centre to deepen Australia's relationships with Southeast Asia. And today our centre is working across Australia and our region with partners such as AsiaLink across education, business, culture and community. We want to enable more Australians and Southeast Asians to work effectively together, to engage thoughtfully and share knowledge and stories with each other. And we particularly want to engage with the over 1 million Australians who identify as having Southeast Asian heritage. They're a very important part of our story. Our programs are supporting scholarships to help Australians study in our region and bringing exceptional Southeast Asians back to Australia to train, network and develop business opportunities. As Foreign Minister Penny Wong says, we share a region and a future. We are stronger when we work together. And tonight we welcome a distinguished guest in that spirit of building connections. Maria Ressa is a leader and a globally recognised expert in freedom of expression, journalism and information in today's world. After a career in journalism in Jakarta in the Philippines, Maria co-founded a top digital news site, Rappler, that has fought for press freedom in the Philippines. As Rappler's CEO, Maria has endured political harassment, was arrested and has had to post bail 10 times to stay free. Rappler's battle for truth and democracy is the subject of the 2020 Sundance Film Festival documentary, 1,000 Cuts. For her courage and journalistic integrity, Maria was one of 2 journalists awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021 in recognition of her efforts to safeguard freedom of expression, which is a precondition for democracy and lasting peace. In 2022, she was appointed by the United Nations Secretary-General to the leadership panel of the Internet Governance Forum and currently serves as its vice chair. She is a professor of practice at Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs, where she leads the Democracy and Technology Initiative. She has authored 2 books on Al-Qaeda and Southeast Asia, and her most recent book, How to Stand Up to a Dictator, has been translated into more than 20 languages. My favourite quote from Maria is that inspiration spreads as fast as anger. And I'm sure we'll all be inspired tonight. So please join me in welcoming Maria Ressa to deliver the 2025 Southeast Asia Oration.
Should I stay here or should I walk? First of all, oh my gosh, this is good. I think let me try. No, the other one. Better, right? Oh my gosh, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time. And in an attention economy, that's huge to get you in the room right off the top. And thank you to the University of Melbourne, to AsiaLink, which I think the last time you guys had me here was like in the 2000, I was still with CNN, I think. And thank God for the ASEAN Australia Centre. It's so wonderful that it has been formed, and and thank you. I have so much to tell you. If you've read How to Stand Up to a Dictator, the things I'll show you are a step forward, at least 2 years in advance. I first want to say, magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat, and for ang daming Pinoy eh. And for my Indonesian friends, my gosh, salamat malam. It's so also, salamat malam. All right. The 4 key points, right? There's going to be a lot coming at you. I think the first is the discovery of how our world has been transformed. And it's personal, it's organizational, and it's national, right? But when you put all the nations together, it then becomes global. The second, what's the tech that enabled all of this? And the third, what are the harms? Why should you worry about your kids? Why did Australia put a 16 years old and below stay off social media, right? And then the last one, I'm not going to leave you depressed, right? We really have found some ways moving forward, but it will require all of us to be able to do this. And that's part of the reason I'm in Australia. And my gosh, for the organizers, again, the Asia Institute, ASEAN Australia Centre, University of Melbourne, and AsiaLink, you guys worked so fast and so hard. And thank you for getting me here. If you're Australian, why do you want to leave again? It's so, the sun is beautiful. All right, let me move. Let's pull it down. I've said this over and over and over. The key part, since 2016, which is when we discovered this, without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these 3, we have no shared reality. I see you all the way over there and all the way over there. We're in a shared reality, and somehow I can reach you better, right? Because we're in the same space. Without that shared reality, there's absolutely no way that we can begin to address problems, to solve anything existential like climate change. We can't have journalism. We can't have democracy. And I'll show you how quickly we can lose it. So facts, truth, trust. The second thing there is that the biggest problem in our world today is actually impunity. Impunity, right? Whether you're talking in the physical world, where you have Putin and, well, Ukraine and Gaza, right off the top, and then you also have Africa, Sudan, all of the different conflicts that have emerged in our own region, Myanmar, right? So as this has happened, that impunity, you'll realize that most of the tactics of the strongmen rulers that are pushing back rule of law are the same tactics used by the tech companies. I'll show you that as well. Hashtag reclaim our rights is the main point. And finally, the last one. Part of the reason I can show you some of this is because I was both the reporter targeted which means when you're under attack on social media, and I was getting an average of 90 hate messages per hour, you don't have to ask the tech companies to give you the data. So it's kind of a curse, but a blessing, because once that happened, all of a sudden, I could take the data and analyze it, and that was everything. So that was the attack. Data is everything. The second point is I run our business with my co-founder, so I can see the impact of everything that's happening. And finally, the last one is we build our tech, right? So that cuts across. All right, now I'm really starting. All of this, as you heard, came out November 2022, the same week ChatGPT was rolled out. And by the second, I was in San Francisco, it was the second part of the book tour, someone in the audience gave me a ChatGPT summary of my book. But this was the question I asked Filipinos at that point in time, and I had hoped that I would not have to ask Americans or I hope I don't have to ask Australians, but this is the question for everyone in our world today. What will you sacrifice for the truth, right? When it is a battle of facts. After that, you heard, it's now been translated to more than 25 languages. And fascinating that regardless of culture, geography, or language, it shares several things in common. The French, very aggressive. It's not how to stand up to a dictator. It was resist the dictator. Can you hear? Japanese was interesting. The title in Japanese is actually not about resisting any dictator. It's about social media, I'm told, right? Korean was interesting, especially after the coup attempts and the counter coups, right? Mandarin, it's out in Mandarin. Yeah, shocking, not so shockingly. It's doing well in Mandarin. This I really like because this is Georgian. And when I went to Georgia last year when it was launched, it's now become the rallying cry for the journalists under attack. I mean, Zia Amaglobeli, she's in jail. She was sentenced to 2 years in jail, but she couldn't say anything at the back of the courtroom. She just held up the book. So that makes you, that to me, I was like, okay. And this is the most recent one. Which country? Oh no, keep going, but interesting. Mongolia, right? Mongolia stuck between China and Russia. What's fascinating again about this is that I'm going to summarize it in 3 takeaway lessons, but you should still read it because I'm not ChatGPT. I did read it for you, but the best part about this is that I wrote it during the pandemic. And the 3 lessons I'll pull out for you, I wrote 400 pages, my editor cut out 200. Because he said, do you want everyone to know everything you know, or do you want them to read it from cover to cover? So please, I think you'll last through cover to cover. So there are 200 pages there, but here's what I hope the takeaway will be, right? The first is that when the cellular level of a democracy, when the attack against our democracies is person to person, right? And what does that mean? That means when you're on this thing, does anyone not have a cell phone here? Oh, is anyone not on social media? Wow, Peter. Okay, but have you tried generative AI? The chatbots, okay, so he's there too. You'll see this, right? So when you're on here, you now have been targeted, right? And I'll go into the technology more. And when you're targeted, that means the defense, or you could call it the resistance, is bottom up. Person-to-person defense of our democracy. That's why please ask yourself, what are you willing to sacrifice? Because I think this moment, if we do not act within the next 6 months, and actually the main onus will be on Americans, right? Then, oh boy. The second, death by 1,000 cuts. Which part of, well, this is the metaphor that we use, so that's not the Taylor Swift song. It's not the Taylor Swift song, which Rapplers were the ones who were saying, 1,000 cuts, not that one. This is 1,000 cuts, Al-Qaeda. And the idea was that every single, cut bleeds. And at a certain point, we've been cut so often, even if it's a paper cut, that you're bleeding out and the body politic dies. It's death by 1,000 cuts of our democracy. Where do you stand up, right? Is it when Gulf of Mexico becomes Gulf of America, right? Is it when a reporter is jailed, right? When I was arrested, our top newspaper came out with this great saying. They took the Martin Niemöller quote, and they said, first they came for the journalists, we don't know what happened next. So death by 1,000 cuts. If you wait, you get weaker, and at some point you die. And then finally, how do we deal with this? Because actually I wrote the book because everyone kept asking me, Maria, where do you find courage? And then I realized, I don't know, I never really thought about it, right? And how do you do that? You embrace your fear. I gotta ask the Rapplers to stand up, because imagine, here in Melbourne, I have some ex-Rapplers in the audience, and Rapplers. Our original reporter, Natasha Gutierrez, David, who's here, a PhD student, Bon, Kevin. Please take care of them. And the Ambassador Amanda Gorley, who was herself attacked by President Duterte then, right? You go, girl. She was super strong. The Australian ambassador was a really weird moment in time. Embrace your fear meant that we thought through what were the two biggest things we were afraid of. One was getting shut down. The other was violence. The other was getting arrested. I got 2 out of the 3. We didn't get shut down permanently, and I'm still here. It's interesting, because my lawyers told me, you can't go up against the government, Maria. You should be talking to the government. I always talk to governments. I'm turning 62, so this is my 40th year as a reporter, as a journalist. But when a bully tries to make you do something that goes against the values you hold dear, it's hard. You don't even start negotiating. And what we learned here was that once we had a workflow for the worst nightmare that we could have, we could move forward. And my team will tell you that we literally drilled a shutdown every quarter, right? If 200, only a dozen came into the Rappler office. But if the policemen came in, they would know what to do with their cell phones, the Rapplers, they would know what to do with their computers. We drilled it. Embrace your fear. Whatever you're most afraid of, you hold it tight, think it through, do a workflow, and keep going. Because if you've already dealt with it, then nothing can stop you. Why is that important? Because your courage will determine the future of humanity. That sounds like it's overblown, but it's not. This moment, and I'll show you more. I gotta move faster than this. I told you discovery, right? Let me show you some of the 90 hate messages per hour that I got. Every time one of them did something award-winning or did an investigative report, I got things like this, right? So this is the way I look, the way I sound. I'm not corrupt. I've been a reporter for a very long time, so they couldn't do those. But what they did do is I have dry skin, I have eczema. And what they did is every photo, they began to make it look really bad. And for a little while, I was embarrassed. Then it got worse. At a certain point when I got used to that, then it became dehumanizing. It took me a little while to be able to show this to you, but I figured it was already public on the internet. The person who sent this to me was my mom. I mean, it was all over, right? And why? Because they called me scrotum face, right? Because I have dry skin. And the crazy thing is that they look for your weakest moment and they try to make You voluntarily give up your rights. This was on Facebook for many, many, many months, right? It's dehumanizing. Dehumanization is the first step towards violence. And they were very creative. This is a Facebook page. The film 1,000 Cuts of PBS. My skin is better than this, right? Yes. I'm going to take this because it's more fun. No, can you? No. Push. Check. No, all right, fine. It's okay, no problem, I can stay here. But look at 1,000 Cuts, right? So this, literally, they kept their Facebook page. Oh, thank you. I like feeling taller. Vogue PH is the page, it's still there, and they're very creative. They didn't just, make my skin look really bad, but they also added scrotum face, right? At the beginning, when it first comes at you, you like cringe, and I think it pounded me for a little while. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Dang. And it did make us stronger. And I gotta tell you, in the time that we were working, right, in 2019, so 2017, after 2016 were exponential attacks on social media, then the law was weaponized. In 2017, we had 21 cases, 21 investigations. At one point, it became 27. In 2019, in a little over a year, I had 11 arrest warrants. I began to workflow getting arrested. I've won 10 of the 11 cases now, by the way. Yeah. Or Rappler. Okay, we got to get off this. It's kind of ugly. I don't know why I stopped. Oh yeah, then generative AI. Of course. Then deep fakes. I spent some time with this Australian billionaire who filed a case against Meta, Andrew Forrest. You guys... So he filed a case against Meta because they were using his face to trick people into buying crypto. I don't know how many people I tricked into buying crypto, but I couldn't file a case. But it's there. I now have deep fakes that tell people with diabetes to throw away their insulin. If you see that, that's not me. And I'm not selling you crypto, okay? So that's the discovery part. It's very personal. But why is that interesting? Because what we found out was that people believe it. When a lie is said 1 million times, it becomes a fact, number one. And number two, those networks continue, right? So let's go to the tech that enabled it. That technology, artificial intelligence, is neither artificial nor intelligent, right? It's actually been around for over 70 years, and it was a marketing term. Actually, between academics, there was a rivalry between academics, and they wanted to just catch your attention. And this is now what is driving our world. And I'll take apart the two things that are there. Social media, which is machine learning. I know there's one Filipino-Australian who is computer programming, right? Software engineering at University of Melbourne, right? So what is this? This means that if you are on Facebook or on any of the social media things, machine learning is used to make a model of you, model is the word they use, that knows you better than you know yourself, right? They use all different data points. Facebook says, actually it was Consumer Reports, said that Facebook had more than 2,300 different big data sets for every one of us, right? But here's the thing, get rid of the word model and replace it with clone. You have a digital clone, did you say yes to it, right? So that's here, machine learning came in, created your digital clone, and then AI came in and created this massive database for micro-targeting. That then is sold. Your weakest moment to a message is sold to a company, a country, and they have your clone, right? So that is advertising. By the way, in 2023, only 6% of about $850 billion advertising industry globally, only 6% was effective. Ask where the rest of that money went, right? Okay. Oh my God, I'm going to depress you. Wait, please give me like 5 minutes. When it's 5 minutes, I will stop. Generative AI. Every single one of the large language models, which is the technology behind it, is it's not anchored on facts. Generative AI is a probabilistic machine, right? Which is the same with social media. So the technology that is ruling our world today, none of them thought making it factual was important to the world, right? So let me then show you what's happened. Right, so these are the two things, generative AI. Deep fakes now are out. The enshittification of the internet, that's Cory Doctorow's word, is out. It's full steam ahead. The number of scams have increased. All right, I gotta go faster here. Let's, on the social media part, right? I used this in, I'm gonna say 2011, right? The tweet or the post is what you see at the top. It carries an emotion. That emotion, the design of social media, in 2018, MIT did a study that showed lies spread 6 times faster on social media. MIT, 2018. That was before Elon Musk bought Twitter and turned it to X. It's significantly worse today. But here's the other part. That emotion spreads on social networks. Those social networks, over time, change behavior. They hacked our biology to change the way we see the world, the way we feel. If you're pumped full of toxic sludge, fear, anger, and hate, that changes the way you see the world, the way you act, the way you vote, right? So, and I'll quickly go through here. Social media, you're very familiar with the casino. There's a casino in my hotel, but the casino is just a slot machine. Opportunity, unpredictable rewards, and then you can do it again, right? And what has it done around it? It's information warfare, the impact on you personally, on your organization or your group, because we behave differently in groups. Did you know in this room, if I yelled at one person, if I'm angry and yelled at one person, it would spread further. But this was the work of Nicholas Christakis. It spreads through 3 degrees of influence. Online, it spreads like wildfire. So this is designed to be addictive. There's sociological. And finally, the last one, and this I worry about our kids, and why the last time I was in Australia, I was like, yes, do 16 years old. Emergent human behavior. Literally, it is changing the plasticity of our brains, our emotional reaction. If you're always pumped full of dopamine, it's like being permanently on drugs, right? Okay, finally, facts, truth, trust, shortened attention spans. This is what's happened. The us against them is normal. When did politics become a gladiator's battle to the death? When did lying become the way to get elected? When did using fear, anger, and hate? Well, that's part of it. The Friends of Friends algorithm is a growth algorithm. All of the social media platforms use it. In the Philippines in 2016, we didn't argue or debate the facts. But when President Duterte was elected, I'm looking at Amanda, if you were pro-Duterte, you move further right. If you're anti-Duterte, you move further left. This is how the echo chambers are created, and over time, that division grows, right? And I'm quickly going through here this has been going on for 20 years, guys, right? The splitting apart of creation of journalism from distribution was around 2014. And what did that mean here? Electoral integrity. If it changes the way you vote, 72% of the world today, this is VDEM, March this year came out with a report that said 72%. We are electing illiberal leaders democratically. And I'll show you why. And finally, this last one. Online violence is real-world violence. The way propaganda works today is not about making you feel China's fantastic. It's about exploiting the fracture lines of society. And the 2 fracture lines in almost every country we worked in was gender and race. And I'll show you quickly through it. Please give me a time. I can still keep going. 15. All right. Okay, I'll go through this quick. This is how we discovered it. We systematized it. It's a company called Nerve, the sister company of Rappler. Underneath Duterte, I couldn't say that because then that would have gotten, legal challenges as well. I got to tell you, it was really hard to survive those years. But this is where we've worked, and I want to show you some of the findings in the report. The U.S. information ecosystem, 3 years of data, structured and unstructured. That means data from all the publications and simultaneously unstructured big data from social media. I want to show you, I'm going to tweet, I hate to tell you, I'm going to go to Blue Sky and share that link, but there's a lot of findings there, but I want you to look at this because what did we learn? Same thing happening in Australia. A generation gap that's gotten even bigger because the way you vote is based on where you get information, where you get your news. And what's fascinating, we looked at these three, immigration, abortion, and Gaza. And look, 55 and up, we're still kind of safe because we stick with traditional news groups. 35 and 54, the guys have young families moving forward. But look at 18 to 34. Social media is the top source for all issues. Social media is where information operations, information warfare happens. I'm going to take you forward in immigration, right? The very last report we did on immigration, and that's Kevin's work here, is Southport riot. And I'm going to show you how you first seed a meta-narrative, right? People may not believe it when it's seeded, but then you pound it repeatedly, opportunistically. This is what happened in Southport. Let me show you what that looks like. The narrative was seeded super early, right? These meta-narratives are seeded here in Australia. Then it was reinforced, and you can see it here. Here's the seeding, November 2022, and it happened in 2024, right? Echo chamber reinforcements. These networks work together over geography. The crisis exploitation, so again, opportunistic pounding, and then hook up all the major actors, and you normalize those immigrants. They're really bad. They're criminals. Actually, this is what we're seeing globally. And starting from Hungary, where Hungary actually has it in its constitution, right? The white replacement theory, we're living through a strange time, but the technology is literally helping change reality in front of our eyes. And I worry about violence, right? Okay, hopefully the last bad thing before I give you the solutions. This is in the Philippines, where if China does move and tries to take Taiwan, we think it'll go first through the West Philippine Sea. That's what we call it in the Philippines, through the South China Sea. So we're in the front lines. And you can see the timeline of posts here. It's increasing year on year, the information operations. So we look at the number of posts, we look at the meta-narratives, and we cluster the narratives together. We also show you which networks actually spread it, and that's here. Oh, go back. So I want to show you here how it changed over time and how it's connected to your domestic politics. I'm going to move here. Back. Okay. So in 2018, that was when we began to see. So the Duterte networks helped him get elected, right? And Facebook sent someone to the Philippines for the 2016 elections, the same as in the United States. But look what happened in 2019. They began to coalesce, right? And then what happened during the pandemic? It got even worse. So the networks expanded. But then what happened after that? In 2021, the networks began to shift. Why were they shifting? Because the North and South, Duterte and Marcos accounts began to shift because we were being manipulated in a whole other way, because they were fighting, right? So then what happened in 2022? Oh yeah, they separated, right? I mean, in 2024, in March this year, President Marcos arrested a former President Duterte and sent him to The Hague, right? Oh yeah, did I mention that? Yeah. That's why you keep going. You never know what's going to happen, right? Okay, so these are the networks. All right, these are the harms globally, and I put them all on one slide so you can be like, bulabog in Tagalog, meaning, shock and awe, and I'll quickly go through. Chris Wiley was in Australia when he said this in 2019. Colonialism didn't die, it just moved online. Surveillance and digital colonialism, those algorithms, the biased and oppressive AI systems are coded. When you have one editor making an editorial choice, it's that choice for that story. When you have a machine doing it, it's tens of millions of times, right? Biased and oppressive AI systems. Oh, by the way, around 2016, where were the content moderation groups? Where were they working from? Warsaw and Manila. So there's a whole documentary from a German network that shows you what we went through. And that's the exploitation of data workers. We in the Global South clean up the data for you in the Global North. So you have to use them with caution, right? Here, the environmental damage, my God, we don't talk about it enough. Just this weekend, I was with climate change experts who estimated that the amount of energy it would take to power the kind of speculative generative AI boom is going to be the size of energy that is used by Japan by the end of the year. So that amount will be needed, and by 2030, it's the amount used by India, right? So the growth of the energy, and at the time when climate change is getting worse, we're demanding more. All right, and then finally, of course, I already started talking about the destruction of agency and democracy. Did I depress you enough? All right, now I have solutions, and there are only 10 slides left. No, I have 10 minutes left. Okay, I'm running out of air. Would you like better, that one or this one? Either, good, doesn't matter. All right, here we go. So, the first thing we did is in November of 2022, about 300 Nobel laureate civil society groups came up with a 10-point action plan. I put it down to 3 buckets. The first one, surveillance capitalism, the one that allows to get your data which makes data privacy a myth. Well, let's stop it. Stop surveillance for profit. When you give your public information ecosystem to private groups whose only goal is profit, we have a problem. Stop surveillance for profit. The second, stop coded bias. Because if you are a woman, LGBTQ+, if you are an ethnic minority, if you are brown or black or marginalized in any way in the real world, you're further marginalized online. And then finally, the last one, journalism as an antidote to tyranny. And I'll say this at the National Press Club on Monday. Given the trends that we are seeing today, small and medium-sized news organizations may die within 6 to 8 months, right? And I'll show you. I won't have time, I can tell you why. So here's the solution. How do we rebuild trust? We have no facts, no truth, no trust. We do it through 3 ways. This was always the way, my elevator pitch for Rappler is that we build communities of action, and the food we feed our communities is journalism. David was in charge of community. Bon was in charge of community. He has a PhD from University of Melbourne, and she's teaching here. So, our pillars, I'll go back, right? So journalism, community, technology. Remember those 3 things. For journalism, Mark Thompson, who now heads CNN, and I chaired the International Fund for Public Interest Media. It's an IO based in Paris. And over the last year and a half or so, we've raised about $60 million. It is going to news organizations as a straight out patch, right? Just straight out. You're going to need this. And these are the kinds of people. Oh, yeah, Australia donated to that also. So $60 million, and these are after last year, 2024. We've increased these news organizations' earned revenue. We've increased the audience reach of their content. And we still have DEI despite what's happening in the United States. Distribution and community, right? This part, you might have seen me talk about this because I talk about this all the time. Since we live in a corrupted public information ecosystem, you can't just say, throw your hands up and give up, right? You have to organize yourselves. And what we did was we took about 150 different groups. This was beginning in 2022. We organized ourselves, 16 news organizations. I like calling this radical collaboration. 16 news organizations. We signed a data privacy agreement with each other. We patched a data pipeline to all the 4 layers of the facts first pH pyramid. 116 different groups that includes the church, human rights groups, environmental groups. Every single person, actually, imagine if all of the University of Melbourne were to share one fact check daily with emotion, but you cannot use anger. That's what we asked our partners to do. And then NERV mapped it every week. And what we found was when you share a fact check with emotion, it spreads significantly faster, and inspiration spreads as fast as anger. It's a group, right? This is the best of humanity. Instead of the worst of who we are, this is how we organized. And then those universities, then we gave the data pipeline, because academics don't get real data. So we gave them the data, and the agreement was that you needed to tell the public every week, what is happening? How are you getting manipulated? What is the meta-narrative? And then you get your peer review later. And some of them took up to a year later before they got the peer review. But the data was very helpful, and they helped the public. And then finally, the last one, you cannot have rule of law if you don't have facts. And 6 legal groups kept all of us accountable. As soon as we launched this facts first pH pyramid, the government, the Solicitor General, filed a case against me and Rappler for, get this, prior restraint. For the non-lawyers, it's like we censored people when this is already out in the public, right? I have 2 minutes left. Oh my God. All right, let me quickly finish this. This is NERV's work. We mapped it. Amanda, you will love this. This is the breakdown of the Philippine information ecosystem by cluster. The people who cluster around news, that's probably our age group. And then look, MOVE is the civic engagement arm, was its own little cluster. Artists tended to cluster together. Activists tended to cluster together. And here's the part. After I saw this, I really began working very closely with the Vatican and Pope Francis, the faith groups. All right, I'm out of time. This is the moment we took over the center of the public information ecosystem in the Philippines on Facebook. The blue, based on eigenvector centrality, the sizes of the circles means its ability to spread. The orange are our linkers, they're our partners, and the yellow is the spread, right? That's based on data. Kevin tried to figure out how to show you what that looks like. All right, the last one, tech. Please, 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 please. 2 groups abdicated responsibility for protecting the public information ecosystem. The tech companies who wanted more profit, and democratic governments that didn't protect us, right? This is not a free speech issue, it's a safety issue. It's like having poison in your water, right? So what we did is we began to look at deliberative technology. What does that look like? And I looked here to Taiwan, I looked to France and Germany, and then I saw the Matrix protocol, and I'll show you what that is. These are the challenges it addressed. I have 3 slides left. 150 million addressable users as of 2 years ago, so this is significantly better. But the Matrix protocol was created in 2014, and look at who's on it. All the French government websites, all the German government websites, the German military, NATO, the US Navy. I mean, the intelligence groups. If they're protecting themselves, why are they not protecting us, right? So what we did was we built a new use case. this is what it looks like. So let's say, please, I dream big. So this is Rappler, this is ABC Australia, this is CNN, right? So let's just say, you know, Joe follows Rappler, Lisa follows ABC Australia. Lisa and Joe can talk to each other, because we're in the same matrix protocol, without us ever exchanging their data, right? It's data privacy, it's end-to-end encrypted, and it is open source. Near the end now, last 3 slides. Chatbots. The internet as we know it is already dying. And that is with the scams that you're gonna be living with. So we started building our own chatbot, and that chatbot is anchored in facts, right? If you're using the commercial chatbots that are out now, the error rate, and this they release themselves, goes anywhere from a high of 79%. They call it hallucination. I call it the error rate. So 79%, and at best it's 16%, 1/6. If you anchor it, your bot, if you create a data lake, an ontology, and anchor it with a graph rag, you can get it below a 2% error rate. Below a 2%. Yes, computer science. It's actually really cool, but building the data lake of all data lakes, that's the dream. I'll leave it with this. We rolled it out very quietly December 2023, because the Philippines is Asia's largest Roman Catholic nation. And if it failed, everyone would be on vacation. It was a great way to test it. And now now it's out. And when we had our midterm elections where nobody knew what was going to happen, it really worked. We were on the Matrix protocol. And please, you build communities of action, please download, try it out, try the Matrix protocol. Our goal is radical collaboration. Part of the reason I'm in Australia is to ask you to join us, right? University of Melbourne, AsiaLink, all of our sponsors. I think this is the way forward if we want to have information integrity. There's a lot more. Did I bore you? That's it. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Andrew Ressa. I'm Director of the Asia Institute, which along with AsiaLink is one of the hosts of the proceedings this evening. Thanks so much Maria for a really engaging and thought-provoking presentation. We really are thrilled to have you with us in Melbourne at this event. You've given us some terrific insights for the upcoming panel discussion and a terrific vocabulary, I have to say, as well. I spent a lot of the presentation jotting down terms that you'd used: facts, truth, trust, impunity, dictators, resistance, gender, race, echo chambers, discovery, tech, harms, courage. You didn't use the word hope, I don't think, but you certainly gave a message of hope, and I think that's terrific. Clearly there's a lot to worry about here. But you've outlined a strategy for us that that gives us a way forward, and that's a really terrific contribution. I'll now invite this evening's panel speakers to join us on stage. Please join me in welcoming Michael Wesley, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Global Culture and Engagement and Professor of International Relations at the University of Melbourne. Laura Tingle, the Global Affairs Editor at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Laura is a Walkley Award-winning journalist with over 4 decades of experience reporting Australian political affairs. Nicholas Coppel, a former Australian ambassador to Myanmar. Nicholas has had a series of senior diplomatic appointments in addition to being ambassador to Myanmar, having been Deputy Ambassador to the Philippines, Deputy High Commissioner to PNG, and Special Coordinator of the Regional Assistance Mission to the Solomon Islands. He's also currently President of the Australia Myanmar Institute. And finally, Ken Setiawan, who's Senior Lecturer in Indonesian Studies and Deputy Director at the Asia Institute. Ken has published widely on the politics of human rights in Indonesia and is a co-editor of the recently published Routledge Handbook on Human Rights in Southeast Asia. So everyone, please join with me in thanking Maria again for her speech and welcoming the panel.
Andrew, thank you. And Maria, wow, thank you very much for a wonderful lecture. There was a heck of a lot of tech in that, and I can't claim to have understood very much of it, but I want to go back and ask a question of you, and then I'm going to ask the same question of Laura. When you were speaking, it brought to my mind something that Hannah Arendt, the German American philosopher who watched the rise of the Nazis in the 1930s. One of the things she wrote, which I thought was really profound, is she wrote that the objective of lying in politics is not to substitute one truth for another, but to create a general climate of cynicism and apathy. So when you were talking about fact-checking and verifiability and so on, what do you do about the culture of people saying there's no such thing as truth? My truth is as valid as anyone else's truth, and I will believe what I want to believe.
That's the argument, actually, that's always used, right? It's all relative. There's no truth. That's also not true. We're in the University of Melbourne, right? We're here, that's a fact. That's not debatable. But online, you can pound 1,000,000 times, we're in Manila, and some people will believe you. I think that, sorry, I just realized, I didn't tell you where Southeast Asia was, right? Because, of course, Southeast Asians were some of the first adapters to the technology, Indonesia. And then I would say the last part, we're back to the future in Southeast Asia. Myanmar is the example of how platforms enabled genocide. We have this from both the UN, which sent a group there, headed by its chairman, Marzuki Darusman, the former Secretary of Justice, and then Meta itself, before it was called Meta, I think. They sent them to Myanmar, genocide in Myanmar. Has anyone actually been held liable for that? Has there been any design changes in the platforms that enabled this? No. So back to the future, Malaysia, we have our, well, let's start with the Philippines, President Marcos. Malaysia, Prime Minister Anwar. Indonesia, President Prabowo, right? So, and how did all of that happen? Part of that is a breakdown of trust and name recall. So you go back to tried and tested names that retain some kind of connotation. 85% of how we vote is not based on what we think, it's based on how we feel. So back to your question, and let me wrap that one up. The goal of the information operations on social media, which is being used for and against your candidate in many instances. There are now private companies that, like Cambridge Analytica, the goal is not to make you believe one thing, as Hannah said, it's to sow chaos so you don't believe anything, in which case you can't demand your rights. You can't mobilize. If we don't have a shared reality, you're not going to be able to demand better. And last, the only form of government that exists that thrives in an environment of no trust is a dictatorship.
Laura.
Well, like everybody else, I'm a bit bamboozled by all the technology. So I suppose what I'd make some observations on is sort of, shall we say, the practice of politics as we see it now. And it strikes me that we've got to this point now where the lies have all become so big that even with all of the manipulation, they're testing, what we see. I just give one example. The Israeli government says there's no starvation in Gaza. And whatever your views are, you've got to say, I'm not sure about that. That's not what I'm seeing. So to me, the interesting thing is the sorts of phenomenon phenomena that Maria is talking about online is actually what we're seeing take place every day now in politics. You know, Donald Trump. And if you think about what your reactions are to stories now, it's not, you know, beyond any ludicrousness of it. I was listening to the radio yesterday morning, I think, and there was a story about an environmental group which was saying that they were going to fight the alligator Alcatraz in the courts. And I found myself thinking, good luck with that one, because you suddenly realise that you don't believe that the US courts will work. You know, the UN is sort of basically just a lobby group. You know, who cares what the UN says? You know, so it's about not just undermining your sense of truth. It's about undermining all the institutions as well. And that to me is the boiling frog moment. That, you know, along the way, it's not just the actual statement that you're losing. It's, you know, it's the infrastructure as well.
Ken Setiawan, last year we saw the presidential election in Indonesia. We saw the election of Prabowo Subianto, someone who had lost two previous presidential elections, ride to power very much based on a social media campaign. Can you tell us about how Prabowo and his backers used social media, why it was so effective, and what that tells us about contemporary democracy in Indonesia?
Thanks, Michael, for that question. Social media was absolutely critical in the election of Prabowo Subianto. As you mentioned, he had run for the presidency twice previously. On both those occasions was unsuccessful. What was really interesting about the presidential campaign last year was that the image that Prabowo portrayed of himself, or his team portrayed, was completely different. So whereas in 2014 and 2019 there was this the image of a military strongman, and I think, you know, in many ways quite accurately portraying him as a populist, out came this cute, cat-loving, cuddly grandpa, and that was with images enhanced by, or, you know, changed by AI, and it made Prabowo look as, you know, not dangerous. Like I said, cute, cuddly, you know, and that absolutely contributed to a more positive reception. It definitely also resonated with young people, who in turn were very critical to his electoral success. Of course, there were also other things, such as that he strategically paired up with Jokowi's son, and Jokowi being so very popular, that really helped with getting people back him. But social media actually was absolutely critical to his election. And if I can just go back to that image. So whereas in the previous iterations, there was this image of a, you know, a military strongman, a populist, that also really didn't avoid the connection with the past, with that he was a general in under the Suharto regime. So by portraying him as, you know, more, I suppose, innocently, that actually also just conveniently ignores all of that. So if even when people knew about his background, then they would say, oh, well, but it doesn't look so bad anymore. And even people that I spoke to in the lead up to the election said, oh, but, you know, this is his third time he's trying. It's so sad that he hasn't been elected yet. So, and what can he do because he's so old? And we have seen what he has done, or what his government has enabled, including an entrenchment of militarization in Indonesia's governance. And that is very dangerous, because that's when, you know, there's less space for civilian control. And that is detrimental to democracy and human rights. And when Maria spoke about, this question, what are we giving up? I think that's a question that resonates also in the Indonesian context.
Nicholas, I'm going to come to you, and I'm going to pose a general point, and I'd like you to respond to it. In a way, there's a close correlation between strong men, and they're all men. I'm thinking of, Duterte, I'm thinking of Modi, I'm thinking of Prabowo, I'm thinking of Trump, and social media. One of the things that, I think about a lot is that social media is actually an alternative form of democracy, because someone develops followers and you can see how many followers they have, and they get instant feedback on what they're saying. And in fact, what they say and the number of followers enables them to gain more followers. So is it a sense in which social media is actually undermining the very process of formal democracy by almost making the process of voting an after the fact event?
Oh, well, that's a very interesting proposition. I mean, I think if I take the example of Myanmar, where Facebook is installed on phones as people buy their phones, and the data that's used when you access Facebook comes free of charge, which makes it an extremely addictive and useful in a low-income country. So for most people in Myanmar, they get their information through Facebook. So it's a very powerful tool for spreading information, and it has been used, as Maria has mentioned, to spread hatred as well, and against the Rohingya Muslim community in Myanmar, and that's been very well documented. And sometimes it's often, again, fake news. There'll be perhaps an image or a story about a Buddhist woman who's been raped and murdered by Muslim men, for example. And that would be enough, spread through Facebook, to cause riots, burning, and killings of Muslim people. But it is used by all sides of society. And I don't think that just building up a following indicates necessarily popular support. I mean, the military commander in Myanmar, for example, had a very large following, and yet it's the National League for Democracy, led by Aung San Suu Kyi, which overwhelmingly won the elections in 2020. I think in the case of Myanmar, the internet has been a double-edged sword, and we saw after the coup in 2021 the military shutting down Facebook and blocking the internet, and then restoring it and blocking it and restoring it alternately as they try and control information. And often it's the timing of information. So they're trying to interrupt, for example, the coordination of protests against the coup by blocking it on particular times. But traditional media, even though Facebook is very important in Myanmar, remains very relevant, and for that reason the military commanders withdrew the licenses of all the independent media. They arrested well over 150 journalists. 50 of them still remain in prison, and it's been very difficult to get facts and information, which is of course precisely the purpose in shutting down the media. And so you have just state-run media or media organisations which toe the government line operating within Myanmar. But the public have become very adept at adopting technology in Myanmar, and virtual private networks have been established. They hadn't been very much used prior to the coup, but there's a very rapid uptake of the technology which enables people to access international sources of information. I think we're also seeing the resistance movement in Myanmar utilise it, social media, both for fundraising, for spreading information, for drawing attention to atrocities. But it's also being used in doxing and the naming and shaming of members of the family of military personnel. Those family members themselves may not have committed any offence. They may be opposed to the coup, but just their mere association was enough for them to get targeted. So it's a tool which is getting used and abused by both sides, more so, of course, by the military dictatorship. So this is perhaps a long way of answering your question, where I think it isn't so much a form of democracy and illustrating the strength of particular politicians through their following that they get on Facebook. I think it's very much more a tool rather than an outcome. And it's a tool used by all sides.
Laura, I'm going to jump to you and ask you about your observation of Donald Trump and how he uses social media to dominate the news cycle. What's his tactics? How does he do it? And, you know, where does that leave journalists like you?
Well, of course, like a lot of people, I've actually moved on to being fascinated by Gavin Newsom, but that's another story. To sort of see him using the Trump tactics against Trump. Look, I think it's not just a social media tactic. It's a sort of a broader thing where it's constantly, now we're going to go to Ukraine, now we're going to go to somewhere else. You know, I'm going to solve this war in the next week. Now we're going back to Gaza. Now we're going to start picking on people in Washington. And it's just that constant disruption, so that in some ways there's no capacity to create a narrative. It's about creating havoc without really caring about the consequences. Because I think you've got to start with the presumption that he actually doesn't stop and think, oh, if I sort of create all of this chaos around tariffs, there's a plan here. You know, I don't think there's actually a plan here, because why is he now targeting India, because it was buying Russian oil when he's actually being nice to Russia? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. But in a messaging way, I think it's just about that process of sort of trying to create an image that he is omnipotent, when in fact, I mean, the thing that keeps occurring to me is all that's happening is that we're seeing that he's so not omnipotent, you know, that he's emphasising the declining power of the United States. The idea that the United States can now solve Middle East peace or solve the war in Ukraine is so clearly ludicrous. I mean, I don't even know if they could if they were doing it properly anymore. And so to me, the really interesting question becomes, at some point, does this just become obvious to people? And I think it sort of is. Whatever his base might be doing, whatever might end up happening in the United States, I've been so struck by the fact that a lot of other countries in the world sort of decided pretty quickly, okay, well, we're just going to have to work around this guy, you know. And I think there was a piece in Politico the other day sort of talking about the fact that the Europeans have got a quite clear strategy of we're just going to humour him. Oh, yeah, thanks, Mr. President. You're so great. You know, just keep doing all that bigly stuff. But in the meantime, working amongst themselves. I mean, he's done the world a bit of a favour in a weird way of making people rethink the world without America, because I think it did make people really, really lazy. Does that go?
Great, thank you. Maria, I'm going to ask you about the Philippines. You know, we were talking before your lecture about the extraordinary dynastic politics in Southeast Asia that we're seeing. Of course, we've got a Marcos back in charge of the Philippines. Who'd have thought it? Now that Duterte's gone, now that he's, you know, often getting prosecuted, who fills that space? Is there another Duterte rising? Is it his daughter, who's the vice president? Or are there other elements, the people who were posting those incredibly horrible images about you? Is there now a waiting constituency for the next Duterte to fill?
Thank you for asking that question. But, you know, the reason I became a journalist, and I'm sure it's similar, Laura, is because information is power. Information is power. The narratives that rule our lives determine what world we create, right? So what happened after he was arrested in March this year was the same Duterte networks that helped him get elected came back to attack President Marcos. Oh, how is President Marcos doing? We moved from hell to purgatory. I mean, we won 10 of 11 cases, right? I mean, and there's no new case. But there is Sara Duterte. Sara Duterte was supposed to have been impeached. Again, you're watching our information operations playing within domestic politics. This is happening in every country around the world. And the domestic politics is, Marcos is now against Duterte, or perceived to be. We have a Senate that, like the United States, I mean, look, what happened in the United States, I am both Filipino and American, right? And I felt like I was teaching at Columbia when all of this was happening, and I felt I had a sense of not just deja vu, but PTSD, right? And it's what happened is the judiciary is weakened because they've been appointed and they're individually targeted. You have a very, very strong executive that is ruling by EO, by executive order, right? 147 executive orders of Trump in his first 100 days, and he is ruling by narrative. It is driving the narrative of the United States, even if everything is at a standstill. And the legislature, like in the Philippines, collapsed to support a very strong executive. In the Philippines, we're in purgatory and we're hopefully doing better. And I know that the work we've done to show you all of these, I know they look like squiggles. And, you know, when we first did those stories for Filipinos, they didn't get much traffic. But when Duterte really started doing his work, boy, did they get a lot more traffic. And I'd say last thing, I didn't even realize, you know, when Indonesia was burning in the fall of Suharto, John McCarthy was the ambassador and Gareth Evans was, you know, how cool. They used to run away from me, so it's I'm glad they're here.
Ken, can I come back to you? You work on human rights. In your view, what are the implications of what Maria was talking about for human rights? Is social media, you know, a boon for improving human rights, or are things not as positive as that?
I think that's a really good question, and I'd also like to build on something that Nicholas said before. Social media, of course, can be used in different ways. It is naive to think that it automatically contributes to a liberal interpretation of human rights, that it automatically democratizes our world. I mean, it would be great if it would, but, you know. So, of course, you know, if I look at Indonesia, social media has played an enormous role in mobilizing protests, communication, but also we can think of other initiatives such as election monitoring. Social media plays an enormous role in also alternative media, and I think it's really important to recognize that alternative media actually does, an independent media does a very good job in exposing human rights violations. I think a lot of alternative media in Indonesia offer a lot of social criticisms that they place in a human rights framework, whether we are talking about land rights, indigenous people's rights, past human rights violations, access to water. I mean, the list is just endless. But of course, social media can be used by other groups. It can be used by conservative and liberal groups. And maybe one example is also how social media at some point, or a hashtag that was trending was in the context of women's rights, Indonesia tanpa feminis, or Indonesia without feminists. So really taking aim at feminist ideas and global human rights ideas about women's rights. We, I think, are all familiar with how terrorist groups can use social media for recruiting. Social media can also, and social media influencers can also be used by governments to promote their policies. That can be done in the context of COVID vaccines, tourism campaigns, but also to promote new legislation which is actually really harmful or very problematic in the context of human rights. And in the Indonesian context, I'm particularly thinking of the omnibus law on job creation, which really impinged on workers' rights, had strong impacts on the environment and the removal of environmental assessments for investors and businesses. So to come back to the question, social media, yes, I think, you know, it can go in both ways. So it can mobilize, but that mobilization can go both in the direction of illiberal and liberal trends.
Let me pose the same question to you, Maria. On balance, social media good for human rights or bad for human rights?
Awful for human rights. Yeah, sorry. And, you know, I mean, look, let's talk about the tech lobby. At the time when the EU was looking at the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act, hit over 150 million euros. Million, did I say, in 1 year. And in the United States around that time, so this was like 2 or 3 years ago, it was $70 million. It's the largest lobby in the world today. Rappler is a partner with every single tech company, right? So I'm not speaking for Rappler, even though I'm using Rappler's data, because we're partners with them. But by design, social media has turned the world upside down because it's good for profit, right? So if by design you spread lies, right? It's like you told your child, lie 10 times. I'll give you ice cream every time you do that. That's the incentive structure. And if you line it with fear, anger, and hate, it can go viral, right? That's the worst of humanity. So no, I think government should be putting legislation in place. I was a target, right? So maybe you don't know until you're really targeted, but you don't want to be targeted. Women journalists in general, this was a UNESCO report from 2022. A 300-page book on UNESCO. It's called The Chilling. Please read it. Women journalists all around the world targeted, right? It's gender and anyway, it's like, you guys know the Netflix series Stranger Things, right? So they go into the upside down, and the upside down looks like the real world, except it's all yucky and gooey. It's like social media's world is more horrible than the upside down in Stranger Things. It's where everyone is killing everyone. It is toxic violence, toxic sludge. Just let me leave it at that.
Now, in about 5 minutes, I'm going to turn to the audience for questions, so please get your questions ready for the panel. Nicholas, you're a former Australian diplomat. What, if anything, should Australia be doing to uphold democratic norms, processes, forces in its region?
Well, I think supporting an independent media in the region is very important. For all the reasons we've been hearing tonight, I mean, about giving people access to factual information that's been properly verified before it becomes published. You know, one of the consequences in Myanmar of all the media leaving is we're getting a lot of we call citizen journalists, so people who are still in the country who are collecting information with mobile phones and posting it. But which is good that there's some information coming out that way, but it's not information which is verifiable. And a lot of it is being produced by people who have been adversely affected by the coup d'etat. So it's this boundary between journalism and activism, because it's trying to portray a particular picture, but it's the only information we have. So supporting, and there are a number of media outlets who are originally based in Myanmar, which have now moved to Thailand or indeed even to Melbourne. They need to be supported. One of the reasons they need to be supported is their revenue base has been completely eroded. There's no longer a capacity for subscription. I mean, there's some online subscription, but the selling of hard copies, the selling of advertising is not there. So financial support is important, but also support for journalism training it remains important right throughout Southeast Asia and the Pacific. More broadly, in terms of support for democracy, I think standing up for breaches of democratic principles is important to indicate to the region where the line is, what should be supported, what the values are that we stand for. And, there are a number of programs for training of parliamentarians, but that tends to be in countries that already have democracies or nascent democracies. In countries that don't have a democracy or have been subject to coup d'etats or have more authoritarian regimes, media tends to be the method of arousing within the population a desire for something more, for something better. And I think that becomes very important.
Laura, I'm going to put the same question to you. Does the Australian media have a role in upholding democracy in Australia's region?
And in Australia, for that matter.
And in Australia.
Do you want to say it? Look, absolutely. And I suppose if I go back to one of the things I've been thinking about in all of this is, earlier incarnations, if you like. Now, I work for a public broadcaster. Maria's book, which is really good, by the way, recommendation. But she talks about how Rappler was not just targeted in terms of personal attacks, but in terms of the attacks on its commercial base. There's people saying, "Don't follow Rappler, don't support Rappler." In the same way, public broadcasters around the world have been under attack from both governments and from some of our larger private sector competitors, i.e. News Corporation. And, it's been a really large onslaught. It's been the same effect, which has been to reduce the funding base of public broadcasters, and you can see what's happening in the States right now. We do have a really important job, and I think it's one that the ABC chair has talked about. It's not just about explaining democratic institutions, but if you look at the sorts of things that, say, the ABC is doing now, it is, and this is what I spend a lot of my time doing, it's about explanation journalism, and it's about following audiences to the places where they are. So, look, the average ABC television viewer or radio listener is possibly about my age and demographic. We are spending a lot of time now going onto YouTube, going onto Instagram, going onto TikTok, and doing pieces that say, look, this is what this issue is all about, and doing so in a way which is factually accurate and authentic, and in the hope that, and in the belief that we have to be there providing that information to people if they want it, so that, yes, they might be getting all the misinformation, but on the platforms where they are, they will also be able to go and say, oh, that's what this is actually about. And there will be lots of graphics, and it'll be, fast moving and attractive, and, look just like one of those sort of really groovy things on social media, music and all those things, lots of stuff going on. So, I think we do have a really important job to do, but I think we have to sort of start it at home. And I think it's sort of been interesting. I'm a little bit optimistic in a way. I think, there've been a few good trends. It has become pretty vile here in Australia, but we've seen a sort of a pullback from some of the worst aspects of it, partly as a result of this last election campaign, which is, I think, at least given people in Australia reason to go, oh, that didn't quite work. So, the forces of darkness will gather once again. But I think in the meantime, that is our responsibility, not just to, try to, get the facts out there, but also to explain to people what they mean in a world where social media means that they may not actually have that understanding of the structures that we might once have had as a general rule.
Thanks, Laura. Now over to our wonderful audience to ask questions. Of course, there are lots of questions. Please don't make statements. Ask a question and keep your question as short as possible. Can we go to the lady just here? Thanks.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you to Ms. Maria Ressa for your presentation tonight. I watched you on CNN growing up, so it's surreal to be here. My name is Grace Tan Johannes. I am a PhD student at the Asia Institute. I'm a student of Dr. Ken Setiawan. I think my question tonight has to do with journalist safety, particularly female journalists, in the current climate of democratic decline. What are some of the biggest risks that female journalists need to mitigate in this day and age? And in the case of an arrest, what would my rights be and what should I do? Thank you.
Grace, thanks for your question. Depends on which country you get arrested in.
Indonesia.
I mean, right? Like, you know, so I have the crack. Well, it's a really tough time to be a journalist. And so kudos to all the journalists who keep going, right? You can look at the number of journalists who have been arrested, harassed, jailed, killed have increased, even as the quality of democracy has decreased. That's stats from almost 20 years, right? If we go right across. In the Philippines, when I was arrested, they were very nice to me. But one thing I do remember was that a woman I barely knew, who was a doctor, who understood how the system worked, stopped me in the middle as I was being brought and said, "Say I am your doctor." Because one of the things that happens is that you're physically checked. A doctor checks you and you're stripped, right? So be aware, right? If you're a reporter, if you're running a news organization, you have to know step by step. I think I went through this with every one of our reporters. One of the best, and this is where we did use social media to defend against attacks, was that anytime our Palace reporter, Pia Renada, we did a training where everyone takes the least number of steps to go live. And she was banned from the Palace and went live, right? So there are times when you don't have a phone, and that's part of it. Let me go to the more horrific things. Let's talk about America, right? And where journalists are being targeted. Let's talk about Gaza, where journalists are being killed. CPJ, I sit on the board of the Committee to Protect Journalists, and you will have seen very strong statements right now, right? Almost 200 journalists killed, and specifically targeted, repeatedly targeted, despite statements that have been made. So what can you do? I ran security for my team at CNN in East Timor. This is not the old world. And this is where I do feel like oftentimes, like what's happening in Ukraine now, the journalists in Ukraine work together. It's radical collaboration because it's super expensive and you don't know, right? So, okay, the three things I would say: know what will happen in case the worst happens, so prepare for the worst, form your alliances, radical collaboration, and the last one, I want to encourage you to be journalists, but you do not walk in blindly, right? So that's the best practices. Talk to other journalists who've been there. And there have been a lot more. When I was in my 20s, it was a lot of male reporters who would be in bars who would say, yeah. It's not yeah anymore. And by the way, sometimes in a conflict zone, it's better to be a woman. That's an old style, right? Because there are other things, because sometimes negotiation works better than a punch. So presence of mind.
Okay. Can we go to the lady in the front row, and then we'll come to the others. We might take two together, one and then two.
All right. Thank you. Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you to all the panels, especially to Ms. Maria Ressa, who is my fellow Filipino. My name is Monique. I'm an aspiring environmental journalist studying here at the University of Melbourne. So my question is, in the global south, like in the Philippines and in Myanmar, where the people's attention span is made shorter by the proliferation of social media, how do you keep important issues relevant and not forgotten by the public when the next explosive issue comes along? I mean, because there are too many issues and the next issue buries the most previous issue. How do you do that? Thank you.
Thank you. And if you could just hand the...
Hi, my name is Tokuro. I'm a Japanese consul general here in Melbourne. And my question is very the simple one. How do you see the role of the media literacy? Since your Japanese book's title is Disinformation and the Dictator. And then I'm very curious, and I understand that, the biggest power against disinformation is media literacy. If you have, then you can fight against the disinformation. So I'd like to get your sense. Thank you.
Yeah. So the quick answer. So first, environmental journalists have been attacked a lot, right, in the Philippines, sometimes even more. So here's a little known statistic. More lawyers have been killed under the time of Duterte than journalists. Right? So getting lawyers to defend us is also another challenge. But how do you keep a story in the spotlight? Especially when we were under attack, we would keep doing the stories, but the big thing that's happened is other news groups no longer pick it up. We're extremely fragmented. So what we started doing is radical collaboration. We began talking to other news groups to say, maybe, we're willing to share what we have, because frankly, for news people, we are all on the same side when it comes to facts. This is a battle for facts, and in a battle for facts, journalism is activism. So you keep focus, you keep going, and you build your community. The second way that you do that is you build communities of action. When we were under such attack online, we went to the public this way, face to face, like this, face to face. That's when you actually make connections, and we couldn't have survived without the help of our community. For the Japanese consul, thank you so much. Thank you for translating the title of the Japanese. I think media literacy is the first step of what Move PH, our civic engagement arm, does. Media literacy, right? Finland, from World War II until now, has put in civic engagement in their schools, and it's one of the things that's allowed their kids to be more resilient. But this is thinking fast versus thinking slow, right? Think the two systems of thinking for a human being. Right now, what this does is it makes us not think. It is a thinking fast process. And so media literacy, I think it should be in elementary school. It should be in the school system. But media literacy alone, without laws that prevent the insidious manipulation, won't be enough.
Okay, the lady just there, and we'll take another one. The gentleman just across from her.
Thank you very much for your courage. My name's Susan Sawyer. I hold the chair of adolescent health at the University of Melbourne, and I'm very interested in your take on big tech, and in particular in relationship to the new social media laws that will be introduced in December this year, banning under 16-year-olds access to social media. In Australia, it's been framed very much around mental health consequences on young people, but clearly from what you've been describing, there's a much bigger world out there, and I'm just interested in what you think about not the mental health impacts, but the potential wider ramifications in relationship to some control over social media, small though it might be. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you pass the microphone to the gentleman? Yep.
Hello, good evening. Thank you to the panel and of course to Maria. I am Carlo. I'm an epidemiologist working in the Philippines. I think if there's anyone from the health background here, hello. I'm also completing my PhD at the University of Sydney. My question is, as you know, our pharmaceuticals and health programs are also under attack by the deliberate misinformation and disinformation, and it affects the health outcomes. For example, outbreaks of measles in the Philippines, contributing to morbidity and mortality. This also makes the community see mainstream media, including Rappler, as peddlers of fake news. I'm so sorry, which is true. Can I ask, from a journalist perspective, how do we engage the community into how do we engage them into media literacy or receiving proper health information? Thank you.
Wow, both such great questions, and I'll play one off the other. When you mean social media control, that it is a bad thing to control, to put legislation in place for social media, is that what you're talking about? Yes. Yeah, look, I actually always felt that technology as a whole was the least regulated industry globally. And the argument that we need to be innovative, so don't put laws in place against us, is false. I can send on Blue Sky. I'll send you to Blue Sky, not to X, but I'll Blue Sky all of the studies if you want them. Ask me for them. So it is good. It's like alcohol, right? Like we have age for alcohol, but I would say it's even more dangerous than alcohol because it isn't just one person losing control of themselves. It's all of us. What's a good example? This building has building codes. Those laws are in place to prevent the building from collapsing on us. The structures, the computer software you're building have no building codes. There aren't even, civil engineering, they have to have their laws in place for that, but the software that now controls our mind and our emotions don't. So it's not a free speech issue. I believe there should be more, and the only reason why you will get legislation for kids, the computer world will call it CSAM, right? They don't call it child pornography, which is what it is. They will call it a database called CSAM. That's the best database for trying to get rid of child pornography. Content moderation is a huge thing. I'm sorry I won't deep dive anymore on tech, but there needs to be more, right? Because there is no protection. Look, Rappler is very little. We have 15 million uniques. We're about 120 people, and yet we're building a public interest tech stack. Government should be doing that to protect us. And that doesn't mean that will mean governments can censor or control, which is what civil society groups will say, right? Like in the EU, I've had the debates that are there. It will, though, mean that things will be transparent. Myanmar, what happened in the virtual world was not transparent in any way. Otherwise, some people would have gone to the ICC, right? So that's, yes. And then, sorry, epidemiologist. Thank you. So the key part, before COVID, I used to say this is like the tipping point of an epidemiological system, right? Like for each of us, it's a virus of lies. Think of it as a virus of lies. It infects you, and you don't know you've been infected, but you keep infecting other people. At some point, the entire system tips. That can be America. Now, how far will it tip, right? Why didn't Australia go that route? Partly because you saw what happened to America. The vote in Australia and Canada was partly a reaction to that. If it wasn't there, would you have gone the same route, right? So virus of lies. And I think about it like a river, and here's this factory, tech companies polluting the river with the virus with lies, and what we do is we go and take a glass, clean up the glass, and throw it back in the river. So please feel my great frustration. But what you said, right? I was repeatedly, and Rappler was repeatedly pummeled with fake news. We just keep going. And that means it will take. So a tech company enabled not just genocide, but enabled the destruction of our reputation among a significant chunk of Filipinos. And until today, we have to reclaim it, right? How do we do that? We do that by being transparent, building a public interest tech stack, working with civil society, radical collaboration.
Here, and then the lady just behind him.
Thank you. Thanks for wearing pink, Maria. I think at the last Philippine election, a lot of Filipinos were disappointed by the result, and they might, many of them, be in this room. And tonight we've talked in relation to the Philippines only of a duality of the Marcoses and the Dutertes. Is there a path in what you've shared tonight for that third way, for the folks who wore pink at the last election to get back in there?
Can you pass the microphone just behind you? Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ronalda. I'm a news production editor with Private Media, the publisher of Mandarin, Smart Company, and Crikey. My question is a bit more layered. You've said that, there's no sense of shared reality, and that's true. Reality is very fragmented because of the way we consume technology. So for news publishers, when news is, broadly consumed online, and search is changing, traffic is plummeting for news sites, Google search is becoming more personalized, there are generative AI browsers, news sites are pulling out of social media, Facebook's threatened to, black out all these news sites. How do, as a journalist, you share that information? When we say information is power, but all these big tech are sort of, they have a monopoly on how information is shared. How do you disseminate it? What do you think the future of journalism looks like?
I love both of your questions. I know Crikey, by the way, as the startup. I love hearing a Filipino with an Australian accent. It's really cool. I couldn't wear pink during the entire campaign. Pink was the color of the opposition, the vice president. Here's what we learned, and this is why the midterm elections are really interesting and why the Matrix Protocol was interesting for me. The surveys, like in America, all were wrong. And what happened in the midterm elections that we just finished was that two opposition, Bam Aquino and Kiko, actually did significantly better than anyone expected. And that is partly because the information operations had let up, right? The Duterte camp was so busy bashing Marcos that they had neglected to actually look at real people, number one. Number two, it was partly because the opposition senators began to be themselves, right? Kiko Pangilinan, senator, he became a senator, but he's actually taken the strongest anti-group positions, even when it was really unpopular under the Duterte years to vote against something. His voting record shows you that. He stuck true to it, and he was elected, right? Bam Aquino, is the nephew of our Ninoy Aquino, well, Noynoy Aquino, but that Aquino line. So I don't know where this will lead, right? But the good thing, again, hell to purgatory and getting better. That does mean, here's the other reason why it worked. People went out. People campaigned. People knew what was at stake. And so the way you fight insidious manipulation is you get together and you organize. This is a journalist telling you to do that. Isn't that weird? But civil society groups, journalism is part of civil society. And when you live in an age of exponential lies, how do you get out of the toxic sludge? So that's the quick answer to there. Oh my God, your next question is far harder. And I think this is, how do we share that information? What we've learned to do, and part of the reason I'm in Australia, is to help, right? For news organizations, we will live and die together. If we get to a point where America falls off the cliff, it will take, you guys are going to have to stand up a lot more. And I think Europe is finding this, but news organizations, we are all on the same side of facts. And I'll be right up front. We've spent $2 million, little group, money that came back because I started winning my cases. So, I mean, just on the back end, right? Rappler's annual revs, and I'll go into the annual revs, is between $4 to $5 million annually. That's how much it costs for Rappler. We're the only, because we focused on tech, because Duterte slammed us, and we would have died in 2018 because the government told our advertisers to get off. We dropped 49% of our ad revenues in 4 months, from January to April 2018. And that's how we created Nerve, right? So ask me anything. We will share the tech, right? Someone asked me, I was running an AI masterclass in Manila, and someone asked me, Maria, has anyone made money on facts? This is the problem, right? Because we're not insidiously manipulating people and we're not commodifying news and people, we're asking people to think, which is what a democracy is. Here's the last part. If you are literally going to stop thinking, which is what the machine can do, right? Please keep your kids, if they don't know how to write, keep them off the GPTs and because they're learning to write is everything. And when the machine does it and they're going to learn to edit, it's almost like you are asking them to run a marathon, but they're outsourcing going to the gym. Doesn't work. So to us, to news, this is part of the reason I'm here. Ask me. What we want is a global federation on the Matrix protocol. If France and Germany have led the way, but our biggest problem as news people, we don't do tech or data that much. Your tech and data teams are going to be your superpower.
The lady at the back in the stripe.
Hi, Maria. My name's Rain Cabrales-Seeker. I'm a Filipino advocate here in Melbourne and a journalist for 18 years now for community media. And my question for you is actually this, because you've often said that without facts, you can't have truth, and without truth, you can't have facts, and you can't have trust, I should say. So in a world where trust in institutions, and this is quite a sweeping question for everyone, the trust in institutions is collapsing. What should we rebuild first? And I know you mentioned the Matrix protocol and things like that, but I quantify it to 3 major, I guess, segments, which is the tech, the politics, and ourselves. And a quick follow-up question, Michael, don't come for me. And if it is ourselves, how do we then build media literacy in the next generation if we have such short attention spans? So thank you so much for your time, and yeah, lovely to meet you.
Could you pass the microphone across to the gentleman?
Yes, thank you. My question is directed to Maria Ressa, CEO Rappler in the Philippines. I would like to mention Philippines when you say Rappler, so because it's, I guess, based in the Philippines. So my question is, in your, Ms. Ressa, in your Vatican speech, you mentioned something like, open close quote, the Philippinization of America, right? And so, why is it so? Is it because Trump and Duterte are the same, like narcissistic kind of men? And I'm just perplexed, really, because during the visit of President Bongbong Marcos, during his visit in the U.S., so Trump said something like, he's a good president, but his predecessor sucks, or something like, something like he doesn't know what he's doing. So why is it that they have the same system, they have the same style, like bluffing people? That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for both your questions. I love the butterfly sleeves. Sir, let me answer your question first, and then kick to yours. Philippinization of America. I talked about how, the quick history of the Philippines: 300 years in a convent, 50 years in Hollywood. We were colonized by Spain for 300 years and then by the United States for 50 years. And we have a constitution that's patterned after the United States, the checks and balances of 3 branches of government. When I talked in the Vatican about the Philippinization of America, which was the same PTSD versus deja vu, it took Duterte 6 months to crush the checks and balances of Philippine institutions. It took President Trump significantly less time, because what he did is, once the legislative followed the 143 executive orders, right, and the kinds of appointments that he made, very similar again to a Philippine president appoints roughly 6,000 people. President Duterte appointed people, that then broke so many things, and we're going to be paying for that in the coming decades. So once the legislature collapsed into the executive, and then you have a judiciary that, you had a judge in Minnesota who was arrested. So they're going to go through the same things we lived through in the Philippines. And frankly, Americans are kind of more like deer in headlights than Filipinos were. Sorry, I'm in Australia, so I could say this. No, but I will say it partly because what helped us, I think, in the Philippines is that 1986 was not that long ago. The seeds of kind of organization and resistance was still there. We had a people power revolt that ousted the first Marcos for stealing $10 billion, right? So 1986 dollars, that's kleptocracy. So that's what I was referring to. In terms of how do we rebuild trust, right? Originally, when we were faced with so much, crisis is opportunity. That Chinese saying is true. Because when we were under attack in Rappler, I sat with my entire team soon after the first shutdown order, January 2018, and I asked them, I said, if any one of you want to leave, this is a whole different time. The median age in Rappler for our team was 23 years old. Very young team, and I was worried their mothers might come after me. No, which they did, no. But I will say not one reporter took us up on that offer. We offered to get them a job in other news organizations. And then we were radically transparent. And what carried us through there was the serenity prayer, right? What things are in your control? What things are not? The things are not in your control. You think it through. How would you react with your worst case scenario? And then you keep going. The things in your control, you move forward. And what was really incredible was that it was the best time to run a news organization. Running a news organization is like having, if you have 10 reporters, you have 10 CEOs. So running a news group under the time of Duterte, they were so mission driven that when we got tired, our 20-somethings kicked in. So it was incredible. So how do we rebuild? I go back. Technology is the backbone that is corrupting our public information ecosystem. Laws have to be put in place to stop surveillance for profit. It is a whole different time, and we are moving ahead like it's okay, right? Look at your ad tech system, crikey. Look at the ad tech system and look at the corruption in the ad tech system. This is, in 2024, I was given the Cannes Lionheart, and Orlando Wood gave me a study that said that of $750 billion of ad revs spent globally, only 6% was effective. Where's the rest? Where does it go? It goes into the ad tech. Sorry, ad tech. Anyway, so to go back to that, journalism, so the tech stack is incredibly important. Stop the corruption. Give us a place where real people can talk to real people and actually debate. Listen, it's not just about shouting. The second was then build our community. And you will start with less, but it's real people. Build a community. Because here's the best part in the Philippines. Again, crisis is opportunity. We have an average of 20 typhoons every year. For every typhoon, Filipinos need the right information to protect their families. And that is what you can trust us on. That's the second. And finally, the last one, Laura talked about this. The journalism becomes even more crucial today. If I had a reporter who said she or he wants to be an influencer, I would say, maybe this is not the right organization. It's not that we don't want influencers, it's that it's part of a system that rewards. It's like forever being in high school, where the popular, right? I hated the popularity game in high school. I was a nerd, I will say it, right? So, there has to be transparency so we can have a system of rule of law and a system of governance. It's the only way to restore trust in institutions. And politicians, please, 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 please learn the tech, right? Legislate for our safety.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. Maria, thank you so much. You gave us passion, lots of it. You gave us tech, lots of it. You gave us examples from the toxic sludge. You gave us profound wisdom and incisive analysis, but most of all, you gave us inspiration and hope. So thank you. Can I also thank our wonderful panellists, Laura Tingle, Nicholas Coppel and Ken Setiawan. And finally, can I thank the organisers for tonight, particularly Blaze and the team from Asia Link and the Asia Institute. And all of you, thank you for coming out in this dreadful Melbourne weather. Please do stay and enjoy the hospitality and the networking afterwards. Thank you very much, and we'll see you at next year's Southeast Asia Oration. Thank you.